It was a solecism of the very worst kind. He sneezed loudly, wetly, and quite unforgivably into the woman's face. He'd been holding it back for 3/4 of an hour, fighting it off as if it were Henry Tudor's vanguard in the Battle of Bosworth. But at last he'd surrendered, and after the act, to make matters worse, he immediately began to snuffle. The woman stared. She was exactly the type whose presence always reduced him to blithering idiocy. At least 6 feet tall, dressed in that wonderfully insouciant mismatch of clothing so characteristic of the British upper classes, she was ageless, timeless, and she peered at him through razor-blue eyes, the sort that must have reduced many a parlour-maid to tears 40 years ago. She had to be well over 60, possibly closer to 80, but one could never tell. She sat bolt upright in her seat, hands clasped in her lap, a finishing school posture which made no concessions towards comfort. And she stared, first at his Roman collar, then at his undeniably dripping nose. "Do forgive, darling. 1,000 apologies. Let's not allow a little faux pas like a sneeze to come between such a friendship as ours." He was always so amusing when engaged in mental conversations. It was only aloud that everything became a terrible muddle. He snuffled again. Again she stared. Why on earth was she travelling second class? She'd swept into the carriage in Doncaster like a creaking Salome with rather more than 7 veils to her ensemble, and for the remainder of the trip she'd alternated between imbibing the railway's foul-smelling tepid coffee and staring at him with a disapproval that shouted Church of England at every available opportunity. And then came the sneeze. Unimpeachably correct behaviour from Doncaster to London might have somehow excused his Roman Catholicism to her, but alas, the sneeze condemned him for ever. That is, if you'll excuse—" It was simply no good. His handkerchief was deep within his pocket. To reach it, he would have to loosen his grasp on the battered attaché case in his lap, and that was unthinkable. She would just have to understand. "We aren't talking about a breach of etiquette here, madam. We are talking about murder." Upon that thought he snuffled with self-righteous vigour. Hearing this, the woman sat even more correctly in her seat, every fibre of her body straining to project disapproval. Her glance said it all. It was a chronicle of her thoughts, and he could read each one. Pitiful little man, pathetic, not a day under 75, and looking positively every second of it. And so very much what one would expect of a Catholic priest, a face with 3 separate nicks from a poor job at shaving, a crumb of morning toast embedded in the corner of his mouth, shiny black suit mended at elbows and cuffs, squashed hat rimmed with dust, and that dreadful case in his lap. Ever since Doncaster he had been acting as if she'd boarded the train with the deliberate intention of snatching it from him and hurling herself out the window. Lord! The woman sighed and turned away from him as if seeking salvation, but none was apparent. His nose continued to dribble until the slowing of the train announced that they were finally approaching their journey's end. She stood and scourged him with a final look. "At last I understand what you Catholics mean by purgatory," she hissed, and swept down the aisle to the door. "Oh, dear," muttered Father Hart. "Oh, dear, I suppose I really have—" But she was gone. The train had come to a complete halt under the vaulted ceiling of the London station. It was time to do what he had come to the city to do. He looked about to make sure that he was in possession of all his belongings. A pointless operation, since he had brought nothing with him from Yorkshire save the single attaché case that had as yet not left his grip. He squinted out the window at the vast expanse of King's Cross Station. He had been more prepared for a station like Victoria, or at least the Victoria he remembered from his youth, with its comforting old brick walls, its stalls and buskers, these latter always staying 1 step ahead of the Metropolitan Police. But King's Cross was something altogether different. Long stretches of tiled floor, seductive advertisements hanging from the ceiling, newsagents, tobacconists, hamburger shops, and all the people, many more than he had expected, in queues for tickets, gobbling down hurried snacks as they raced for trains, arguing, laughing, and kissing goodbye. Every race, every colour, it was all so different. He wasn't sure he could bear the noise and confusion.